Writer revisits Dr. Mason, Biloxi wade-ins. Amy Lemco of Monmouth has been a storyteller for a long time. I always liked stories. I always wanted to be told stories at bedtime that were family stories, Lemco said. I have tape recordings of me just making up stories when I was about 5. But other means of creative expression soon proved diverting. I did everything that was art. Painting and drawing, pottery, storytelling, she said. I have no musical talent, but if I did I'd be into that. Dancing. Anything that's artistic, I've done it. Including acting. I took drama in high school, she said. But I was writing at the same time. She then got more serious about her writing. She finished her first book, a spoof on fairy tales, before turning 14. Fast forward a few decades. Lemco writes another book. But it's no fairy tale. Instead, it chronicles a black man's effort to desegregate his part of the Deep South. Gilbert Mason was a Mississippi doctor. He was also a civil rights activist who organized a series of wade-ins in the 1950s and 60s to desegregate Biloxi Beach. The first 2 wade-ins were peaceful. The third one was not. Lemco chronicles Mason's efforts in her book, Wading In, Desegregation on the Mississippi Gold Coast, which will be published in October by University Press of Mississippi. According to Lemco, hurricanes had caused severe erosion at Biloxi Beach, resulting in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers being called in to restore and protect the shoreline in 1953. That work was paid with federal tax dollars, so Biloxi Beach became a public beach and thus subject to federal desegregation laws, said Lemco. But that didn't change a thing on the beach. Instead, what was happening was by practice, it was still being segregated. Mason knew the law. So he pushed back with nonviolence. He decided to go swimming there with a friend. The police officer showed up. Said, "You can't swim here." Mason said, "Show me the law." There was no law. Mason and his friend left, said Lemco. The doctor tried to get more people to show up for the second wade-in, but nobody followed his lead. So Mason went swimming by himself and was promptly arrested, said Lemco. Which was good for Mason, because now there was proof that black people were being forced off the beach, she added. It got the black community behind him, now that he was arrested. Violence marred the third wade-in. This time the white community was ready. They were riled up and ready for violence. Which is just what local law enforcement wanted, said Lemco. So basically the police did not want to arrest anybody because they knew, behind closed doors, they had no legal standing. So what they wanted was for the citizens to take care of it. Which they did. According to Lemco, the white community brought weapons, beat black people off the beach, and caused a bunch of injuries. She added white airmen from nearby Keesler Air Force Base tried to help the swimmers, and were also injured. The riot drew national attention and NAACP involvement. And now there's tons of news coverage about it nationally, said Lemco. Lawsuits followed. Court proceedings and legal maneuverings, which now included private property owners seeking reimbursement, as well as federal and local governments, took 5 years and yielded no decision. Tired of waiting, a fourth and final wade-in was staged. At some point, the black community is like, well, we're just not gonna wait for you indefinitely to have an answer. So they had a final wade-in, said Lemco. Some 50 people were arrested because, at that point, they had the FBI there watching the police. They clearly cannot let another attack happen by the citizens. So they arrested the waders. Years of legal wrangling finally ended. The black community's reaction to its victory was subdued. I don't think there was a day that everyone went out to celebrate the desegregation of Biloxi Beach, said Lemco. I have interviewed some of the survivors who were there. I think it was kind of quiet. Maybe because civil unrest in the Deep South was on boil. When the wade-ins first began, that was at the beginning of when all the civil disobedience was starting to happen, stool sitting and things, explained Lemco. By the end of it, you had huge things that were taking up a lot more attention than this tiny little grassroots thing. You're having marches over the bridge in Selma, and the murder of Martin Luther King. Where everybody was getting hosed and the dogs, and that was being nationally broadcast. Medgar Evers, head of the Mississippi State NAACP chapter, was to be part of the fourth wade-in. But he was assassinated before it happened. Mason was pallbearer at Evers' funeral. Martin Luther King, Jr. attended the funeral. Mason and King met on a flight, said Lemco. King autographed Mason's fraternity card. They were members of the same fraternity. Mason has not been forgotten. Markers and a mural at Biloxi Beach commemorate him and the wade-ins. There's also a Dr. Gilbert Mason Day in Biloxi, along with a research festival named in his honor. To read this story and more, head over to www.pokeio.com.